What's up everyone, welcome back to another video in the series of creating a Wordle Companion App using our Shiny. So I know I promised you all that we were going to finally dive into including a word list data set within our Shiny app so that we can actually start using the feedback that Wordle gives us to reduce the possible words and help us make better guesses in Wordle every day. But as I was going through, I saw really what we did in the server last time, and I figured we should really clean that up before. So instead of finding and replacing all of these various letter IDs within our change letter color function, what we can do is we can actually take all 30 of these lines of code and just pop that effectively into a function, but a much more streamlined function, and then have one single line of code to apply this change letter color function across the board to all of our IDs that will then change color. So just as a quick little reminder of what this is doing, what the change letter color function is doing is it's taking each of these IDs, L1, W1, letter 1 of word 1, which would be this one here, and it's just doing the functionality to help us, change the color of the background of that button so that it is the same color as what Wordle gives us, which eventually will treat it as the way Wordle does, with it being in the wrong spot or the right spot or not in the word at all. So let's go ahead and create a new file so that we can start adjusting what it is that we're doing. So let's kind of recall what we have here. I'm just going to take this just for some reference. And so what I'm going to call this function is going to be just initialize color change. And it's going to be a function that just takes in the session and the input. And so this is what we have for our code here. So we're iterating through each letter and we're iterating through each word. So if I want to think about this, I have 5 letters across 6 words, right? So if I wanted to just print out all of the words, I could just do for word in 1 to 6, and let's just print word, right? So if I run this chunk of code here, we see it's 1 to 6, but I don't want to print word every time. What I want to do is I want to cycle through all 5 of the letters of each word before I move on to the next word. So we're going to do for letter in 1 to 5. And then here, if I print letter, what we'll get here is we're going to get 1 to 5, 1 to 5, 1 to 5, 1 to 5, 6 times for each of the words that we have, which is in 1 to 6. So that's not really what we want to do, right? What we really want to do is we want to create some sort of letter ID. And this letter ID is just going to be the ID that we pass into the change letter color. So let me call this letter IDs, and we're going to paste 0, L, so it matches what we have below. And then we're going to do the letter, and then an underscore of W, and then the word. So it's going to paste the L, and then the letter, which is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then underscore W, and then the word, which for that first case is just going to be the 1, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the letters, and then it moves on to the second word. So if we go ahead and we print letter IDs here, run this code, we see that we have all of our letter IDs that this creates all of the letter IDs that we pass into our change letter color. But the issue is that every single time that this for loop goes around itself, it's just overwriting this value of letter IDs with the next one. So really what we want to be doing is we want to store each of our letter IDs. So let's go up above and let's just define a letter IDs as an empty vector. So before we do anything, we're just initializing that as an empty vector. And then all we want to do is we want to fill this letter IDs vector with each letter that it iterates through. So we want to store it with letter 1, then letter 2, and so on. So if we run this chunk of code, right, and then if I look at letter IDs, what we get is we get letter 1, letter 2, letter 3, 4, and 5 of word 6, because that's the last word we go through, right? But we don't want just the last word. We want all 6 of the words to be stored. So in order to do that, after we go through all the letters, we now want to go through all of the words, and we want to store something there. So we want to store a word IDs variable. And this is just going to take in our word IDs, and we want to keep appending our word IDs with the letter IDs that we're creating here. So it first creates this, and then it creates the next word and the next word. So we're going to go above here, call this word IDs, again, just as an empty vector. And so let's run this chunk, and then let's take a look at our word IDs. And now we've got all of our word IDs and they're all actually accessible. So I could do word IDs 1 gives me that, word IDs of 2 gives me the second letter of the first word. So now I can actually access each of these IDs that I want to pass in to the change letter color function. So rather than kind of going through and iterating over this word IDs, what we can do is we can actually throw this into one of the apply family of functions, and I'm just going to choose the sapply. This also will work with the lapply function as well. So if you're more comfortable with one or the other, feel free. This is a very simple apply function, and we're going to just apply. We're going to take the ID, and then let's just print out what the ID actually is. So again, we've got this, which stores our word IDs as we saw, and then we're going to apply this sapply function to our word IDs, and for each of those word IDs. So for word IDs 1, we're going to print out that ID. Then for 2, we're going to print out that ID, so on and so forth until we hit the end of our word IDs list. So if I run this sapply, what we see is we get L1, L2, L3, L4. Great. But that's not actually what we want to be doing with this. The thing that we want to be applying here is our change letter color function, which is the session input, and then it takes in that ID. So it's going to take in this, and then it's going to do the next one and take in that, so on and so forth. So now that we have this, we can delete the code that we copied from our server for reference, and then we'll go ahead and save this file. And we'll call this what we called the function, which was initialize color change. Save that. After we save it, we just need to read this into our UI so it's accessible to our app. Source, functions, initialize color change.r. So now that we have that, all we need to do is initialize color change and then session and input. So if we run this now, we should see that everything is working just as it was before, where we can still change all of this, but now we turned all of this code that's commented out into just this one line here. So I'm going to delete what we have here, right here, and then we're going to say just run color change function for each ID. And now our server is really, really clean. We just want to run the color change for each ID, and we can do that right within one single line of code that we created within a new function of initialize color change. So I hope this helps to hopefully teach you a little bit more about how we can use functions to make our lives easier in Shiny. And I hope that this was a helpful way to improve upon what we had written last time. And so next video, I promise, is going to be a video where we actually dive into some data and start working to make this app something functional that can help us dominate Wordle on a daily basis. I'll see you guys then.